First. All right. So, hello, Tony King here, y'all designated managing broker. So great to be back with you all with another incredible compliance corner. Wow, this is going to be a good one. So we have a few special guests here today with us. Some of the other managing brokers that are brokers around the state are joining us. We also have attorneys everywhere. It's like attorneys all over this call. Why? Because it is important. Today we're talking about fraud. Fraud. Nobody likes that term. It's a scary term. We're going to talk about why it's so scary. We're going to talk about the most important thing, which is how you can stay away from it. We actually have the big bad TREC, the big bad wolf. They're not bad, honestly. They're good. They're here to protect the public. They're also here to give guidance to agents to prevent us from taking advantage of the public, whether intentionally or negligently. So that's kind of their piece in helping us to all be compliant underneath TRELA, right? So without further ado, I will introduce the incredible individuals on this call. First and foremost, we have none other than Miss Mary O'Rourke. She is well, I'll let you say it. Hey, Mary, you introduce yourself.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Mary O'Rourke. I'm one of the in-house litigation attorneys here at eXp.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mary. We got Sizzling Shay Cotter.
Hi, folks. Shay Cotter, one of the managing brokers right here in Texas.
The Magic Michael Hughes.
Hey everyone, Michael Hughes here, managing broker here at eXp.
Love it. Michael Malloy.
Good morning, or good afternoon, excuse me. Michael Malloy, Director of Enforcement with Real Estate Commission.
All right. The Texas Real Estate Commission, right?
Yes. One and only.
There you are. Like which one? All right. Roy Minton.
Good afternoon, everybody. Roy Minton. I'm the Chief Investigator for the Texas Real Estate Commission.
So we got the chief, we got the deputy. We don't mess around. We don't mess around at eXp. We brought out the big dogs because this is such an important thing, and we are starting to see a huge influx. I know Shay and I work together almost weekly on some of these things. We bounce it off Michael, we bounce it off Mary. A lot of times when these things escalate, and then unfortunately we end up having to have conversations with Roy more than probably we would like to. So I brought everyone together so we can talk through some of these things. TREC has brought some really great information in their advisories, which is really one of the things that prompted me to say, hey, let's see if we can't all get on the call together, because on one of the chats I had with Roy, he actually mentioned this. So Roy, will you kind of talk through? I'm going to do a screen share here of one of the advisories that you all put out, and I thought it was great. I thought it was on time. Saved me the trouble of having to write something myself to send out to agents, because you all had this already together. So I'm going to share this screen here. And Roy, would you kind of walk us through some of the most common fraudulent or deceptive type transactions as it relates to sales?
Sure. So what you're referring to is an issue that we've been seeing for about 8 months. I guess it was about 8 months ago that we started seeing complaints coming in connection with consumers that were filing complaints against a real estate agent after they found out that their property almost always, 100% of the time so far, has been unimproved property that had been listed by an agent, obviously in a broker, and the person purporting to be the seller was not the seller, was not the owner of the property. This appears to be widespread these days, not just in Texas, but in other places. I'm actually looking at and received, I don't know, Tony, if you got a hold of this, but the Secret Service of all organizations actually published a warning in connection with these type scams. They involve, a scammer making contact with a real estate agent and requesting that they list their unimproved property for sale. Some consistent themes we're seeing is that the preposter, the fake seller, avoids meeting the real estate agent in person, and many times avoids even phone contact. A general kind of path that we've seen is that they make email contact. They indicate they're not in the region that the property is, and they just want the property listed and sold. In some cases, we've seen that some agents have been at least suspicious enough to request some identification. In other cases, not. But the bottom line is properties get listed for sale. with a listing agreement executed by an imposter. The property is listed on the MLS. In most cases, the owners of the property, thank goodness, find out about it, bring it to the attention of the listing agent, and these transactions get shut down. Unfortunately, we have at least one case where a transaction closed and the imposter was provided the funds from the sale of a property they did not own. And so, from an investigative perspective, I think just making eXp agents aware of this ongoing issue. I know by now it's been going on for more than 8 months, because 8 months ago is when we started getting wind of it. And typically that's always a few months behind minimum when this activity begins. But I've investigated at least 7 or 8 cases. I think I have a couple more on deck. My other investigators have been investigating cases like this. So it's an ongoing problem. And, I think I'm going to let Mike address the best practices, but clearly just being aware and having your antenna up when you receive a lead. A lot of times these are leads that come through lead type sources to your brokerage. Seems like a great deal. When you start getting the warning signs, such as a person just wanting to make email contact with you rather than ever meeting you, avoiding phone calls, that should definitely alert you that there's a potential problem. And additionally, I'll let Mike address kind of other best practices. But, in the past, there hasn't been a big scrutiny on a listing agent, looking into verifying who their seller is, who the owner is, other than maybe checking the appraisal district records. It might be a good idea that more than that, in fact, I would encourage, but I'll let Mike speak to this, that more than that probably ought to be done these days as a best practice because of this ongoing issue.
Love it. Michael?
Yeah, I agree with what Roy was saying. A lot of it deals with just, I don't know, just having that sixth sense and realizing maybe something's odd, especially when in some of these situations they'll reach out of the blue, or they may have some extraneous circumstance, or I think we've seen also, situations where they'll give some excuse to why they can't be, available for a phone call. There may be a military service or, sick family member or something like that. It's some of those red flags, like it's maybe need to do a little more due diligence and to make sure everything's on the up and up. The CAD's always a resource, but there's nothing wrong. You're going to be that person's fiduciary. Nothing wrong with like asking for some ID or something like that, because you got to keep that stuff confidential either way. And that could be something you explain to the customer before they become your client. There's this fraud out there. That even sending them the link from the TREC website. Like, I just need to do my due diligence because I got to protect it just goes into those fiduciary responsibilities in general.
I love it. Yeah, no. So Shay, if the Prince of Nigeria reaches out to you and says that he owns property, it's an unapproved lot in West Texas. What's the next step that agents should take in that scenario?
So in that scenario, I think one of the best pieces of advice I've seen, and this goes back to that Secret Service document. This was something on that Secret Service document that I noticed back in February when we were at the Texas Realtors Conference, and they were all sitting on the tables. And I thought it was a great idea to publish those things. And one of the best pieces of advice on there was set up a Zoom conversation or, Google Hangout or something where you've got, the purported seller on screen, and you can ask them on screen, hey, I just need to do my due diligence. Can you show me some photo ID while we're on screen that's got a picture that's obviously got their picture on it, and then the name that matches the deed record or the appraisal district or something like that. If they can't produce that, for me, that would be the first sign that maybe we need to kind of press pause a little bit and investigate this a little bit further before we go forward.
Absolutely. And if it doesn't say that he's Prince Mbutu, then listen, we got to move on. I'm very sorry. Michael, your thoughts. I know that you recently did a great training in our cloud environment about this very topic, right? And you talked about some of the red flags. Some of those same red flags are indicated on the TREC advisory letter that I just shared. Do you want to talk about what some of the red flags are that are some of the reoccurring themes I think that Roy mentioned already?
Well, yeah, a lot of it is what Roy's already mentioned. You know, there'll be some reason why they can't meet in person. There'll be some reason why there's an urgency and they have to do this right now. There'll be some reason why they want to list below market, and sometimes ridiculously below market. You know, oh, I just gotta get this done fast because something. You know, they'll have some reason. And you know, a couple of other things that we pointed out in the training. You know, a lot of it came from this advisory or matches it, but it was like what Roy, I think it was Mike that was saying. You know, there's a sixth sense. You know, each one of these things by itself may be just okay. That's just a quirk of this deal, but when you start seeing them in combination, there should be red flags going off all over the place. And I love the idea of getting ID and you know, let's get some confirmation, something beyond just a check of the county appraisal district.
I mean, if
Absolutely.
you're nearby, you could drive by the property. If there's something interesting about it or whatever, I mean, you could try to trip them up on questions about that as well. I mean, you know, but you can even get on the guy, like, I need to know some of the details about the property. Because, you know, if there are issues, I'm legally required to disclose defects that may be on the property. So, you know.
Absolutely. And this doesn't have to come across y'all as like scary, freaky type stuff, right? A lot of this is conversation that you should already have with any seller, right? How long have you owned this property, right? That's a question that fraudster may not have the answer to. How long have you? Yeah, they may, public record, okay, maybe. But in any questions that you ask that can kind of catch folks kind of on their heels to further raise some red flags as you begin to kind of ask those sort of questions. Who else owns the property? How long have you owned it for? How many acres is it exactly, right? And those sorts of things. If you can't answer that, there's no owner in Texas that doesn't know how many acres, right? Unless it's some kind of a you know, deal where someone died, in inheritance, that kind of thing. But for the most part, everybody knows exactly how much property they're dealing with to the T. So I would certainly look at that. One question I have for you all, because it seems like you all are working really closely with the TLTA on some of this. What role has the TLTA played on in this, and the seller impersonation fraud task force, and then the Texas Land and Title task force? What exactly is that, and can y'all elaborate on that some?
I only need a little bit details. I mean, TLTA came with us. I mean, we were aware of the Secret Service bulletin. They wanted to partner with us to get this message out to our license holders, because I know they've sent this out to all the title companies that they have. Because, I mean, obviously after it's been wired, that's happened. I mean, after the money's wired, it's gone. So the last stop of anything is the title company be aware there's some weird things going on. So I think we're trying to become full circle on educating everyone on this issue.
Wow. I'm so glad that you mentioned the title company, right? Because a lot of times the title company is where, we would expect these things to get caught. And unfortunately, I think there's some instances where that doesn't occur. But if the title company is doing their due diligence, or is that true? I mean, is that a misconception on the part of agents? Like, hey, title companies should catch all this stuff. I would think so. But I've got some title company owner friends that say, hey, actually, no. I guess what's TREC's thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, when you run your normal business, you're not going to catch everything. So that's why I think educating more people, if the agent may know there's something up, I mean, they can communicate that, necessarily with the title company, especially if some sort of weird wire or something. I mean, that's how that stuff usually comes in.
That's big.
And I think they just wanted to educate their people, because they'll see it's, it's vacant land or something, or this person's not even, their information's, they're out of state or something. So yeah, and they just giving them the same red flags that the brokers and sales agents are going to get. So
Absolutely. And, and that's why it is important, though, as well, to use reputable title companies and not necessarily these kind of mom and pop shop title companies in the back of a Burger King. True story. There are title companies that work inside Burger King. I know, because I've done a closing at one, but that's another story for another day. You don't want to be doing that, right? It is important to have actual reputable title companies that will be able to even prompt you, because sometimes as agents, you're running a mile a minute, you're doing this stuff, and you may not catch something. And then that's where a strong title company comes in and says, hey, by the way, have you actually met with this gal? Or is this like one of those fraud things? And that they may ask the right question that you didn't ask to kind of to raise that red flag for you. So very, very important to have a relationship with title. Also, as a part of the listing process, we recommend having that preliminary title search run as a part of getting prepared to go on the market, right? And researching the owners. Hey, are these all the current owners? Is that something that Shay, I know you have a team as well. Is that something that you're teaching your team, that we're teaching, at the brokerage as well?
Absolutely. Trying to do our due diligence both within the tax record, the appraisal district, that sort of, begging title companies to go ahead and open title and get those things going. It kind of takes an all hands approach because there's so many different nuances that can slip by, kind of like Michael was sharing earlier. Any one of these might just be the uniqueness of the transaction, but when you start seeing sort of an aggregation of a lot of these things that make it a little bit more likely, and as those things add up, it takes an all hands approach to really kind of have everybody scrutinizing every step of the way, because some of these folks are just so slick.
Yeah, and to that point, you're right. You have to look at a combination of all these different things, because I had a chat with another agent at another brokerage far, far away that was a part of a scenario like this, and that individual did a Zoom call, and they had an ID. I mean, but it was a fake ID. I mean, it's like, and as we even move into AI and deep fake and some of the, crazy stuff that's going on out there, agents just have to have their wits about them now more than ever, because it's easier than ever to pull up a fake ID. It's easier than ever to even change, your face, you change your voice. I mean, it's insane. So, yeah, I don't know that there's a great answer. And the conversation I had with that agent, so like, what could I have done differently? And it's like, I don't know. It's not you have to do the very best you can, cross every I that you can possibly do, and go on from there. Mary, you've been quiet. That makes me nervous. Am I saying something I shouldn't be saying?
No, I'm just taking in what everyone's saying. It's very important. The title company serves a purpose, right? And they're supposed to verify ownership. But, in my opinion, we should not be relying entirely on the title company. The title company isn't interacting directly with the client, so they're not going to see necessarily the red flags that one of our agents may. So going off on what Shay said, sometimes we get some interesting clients, right? And I think when it comes together and you get that feeling in your gut, hey, something's wrong here, I think that's the time the agent needs to dig a little further. But I do think that especially in Texas right now, with the trends that we're seeing with the vacant land fraud, it's important for our agents to ask their client for the government issued ID, and they can explain why. Right, there's a trend in Texas. We just want to have to do our due diligence here, and the client should freely give it. But I will say, some of these fraudsters are extremely sophisticated, and I will tell you at least one matter that I've seen. The agent did everything appropriately, and they asked for the ID, and it was, I guess the person was really good with technology, because they had a fraudulent ID that looked, I looked at it, it looked like an ID. So, we just have to, my recommendation is to agents, just do everything you can. And I think Mike touched on this earlier, and I do know, at least in Texas, it seems like the fraud is limited mostly to vacant land. But if you just ask them general questions, and I think you said that, Tony, too, like about the acreage. I mean, if it's their property, unless like, they got it from a descendant or something, they should know basic things about it. Like if you ask them, hey, who'd you buy this from? When did you get it? Just things like that. They should be able to answer that. And if they're unwilling to, give you that kind of information, to me, that would be a red flag. And I think an agent would know or should know to look further into that to protect themselves.
Absolutely. And, it's what kind of easements do you have, or is there frontage on the property, road frontage, all different things you can ask. Who owns the lot next door? Are you looking to subdivide? Like what, and just asking additional questions, even when it's a lot. There are good questions that you can ask. What kind of exemptions? Do you have an ag exemption on it? How long has the ag exemption been in place? Whatever, right? Having these conversations, because again, if you own a piece of property, that means you're going to be paying taxes. And then if you're paying taxes, you would know if you have an ag exemption or homestead exemption or whatever, you may have on that property, or none at all, right? Is this zone commercial, or, kind of just having that, just basic questions that you should be having with those sellers. So I'll say this, let's keep that in mind. All right. So we got to move on. Hopefully that provided some incredible amount of value to you. If it did, like, share, subscribe, click the bell. You know what to do. Why do I always have to ask? You should have done it already. All right, moving on to the next important topic here is leasing fraud. Right now, this is a big one. That's why I wanted to save some time here, because with leasing fraud, this is even dare I say even more prevalent, I think. I mean, in terms of the number of cases that at least I'm seeing. Not sure if anyone else on the call would agree with that, but I'm seeing quite a bit of these. But TREC's got our back. TREC's got the back also of the consumer in getting this information and promulgating this out. So, Michael or Roy, talk us through this form.
So let me just walk you through what we're seeing on the ground. And Shay and Michael, I would think you guys would particularly want to be in tune, because the leasing fraud issue that we're seeing is more prevalent in the greater Houston area than anywhere else in the state. So Houston is the hotbed for this activity over the last couple of years.
No pressure.
What we're seeing here is generally what is the most common is that the real estate agent is going to be dealing with a third party, an unlicensed third party that is referring applicants to you. We're not going to mention the names of these entities. We know a handful of them, but we're not going to mention who they are on this call. What I can encourage all agents to do is that if you are working with a referral source that's an unlicensed third party, that's warning number one. Advice is that investigate the referral source. Most of these referral sources have a pretty big social media presence, and they are advertising to consumers that they can help consumers that have credit issues or eviction history issues or even criminal history issues, that they can assist you in credit repair, or we can get you a rental, we can get you a lease at a residential property regardless of these type issues. Subsequently, the very people that are marketed to with this kind of marketing end up with a credit report that is provided to the agent by the third party referral source. That's a perfect credit report. They've got a good credit score. They have no evictions, no criminal history. What we're seeing is that agents are being used as mules, so to speak, to curry applications and in many cases credit reports to a listing agent with the indication that they have a great applicant. In many cases, we're also seeing that the applicant is offering a little over the listed rental amount. They're secured rental based on a credit report that's been falsified. We have determined that most commonly that falsification is going on at the third party referral source, and folks are moving into homes that are not qualified to rent, and bad things typically happen. In fact, almost most of the time, bad things happen. Specifically that the applicant or tenant is not even the person that that is on the application, or if they are, it's not long before they're not able to make rent.
Yeah.
And so I think the biggest things I would say is please have a heads up for third-party referral sources and do some due diligence. If you're going to deal with a third-party referral type source, do some due diligence on how they market, how they advertise, and is that consistent with the application data and the credit report and eviction history that you're seeing. From an investigative perspective, an agent that has done numerous transactions with the third-party referral source, we typically find, or at least in the past, the last couple of years, that the agent was notified of problems with previous applicants, i.e. tenants, that were referred by the very same entity, and yet they continue doing business with that third-party referral source. That's not something you want to do, right? Because you're establishing you potentially have a track record of being involved in that type activity. So just be on the lookout. This is a big problem. I would say it's the number one problem that we're seeing here at TREC enforcement over the last 2 years. And there's not really an indication that it's getting better yet. As a matter of fact, what we're seeing is the problem's more widespread than we ever could have imagined a year and a half ago.
Yeah. So, and here we're talking about this kind of application fraud. And when we talk about rental fraud, there's a few different categories. And I'll pull up the Texas Realtors article because they had a really, really good one as well. I say good, like, because I'm a nerd, right? Because I get into some of this stuff. But it is interesting if you do get into that stuff. But you're absolutely right. And I think that some of the red flags include guarantees, right? If they're marketing on the premise that I can guarantee that their applicant gets approved, run the other direction, right? Because there's no way that you can guarantee anything ever in real estate or in life for that matter. Shay, your thoughts? Have you
Thank you, Tony.
You're welcome.
I think the old adage of if it's too good to be true, it probably is. Again, I think this is more evidence that now more than ever, we need agents to think comprehensively about a situation, where they're getting their lead sources, whether they're vetting those lead sources, and then broker support, right? If something smells fishy, reach out. That's why we're here. Ask for help. Come to us and say, does this seem fishy to you too? Is there more I should look at? We, the managing brokers here, we see a much bit larger scale than those agents because they're just looking at their general market and the things that they're seeing, which might be very small or very large depending on their production, but it's not nearly the breadth of things that we see on the brokerage level because we're talking to so many agents. And so, thinking comprehensively, reaching out if you've got a team, looking for your broker support, that kind of thing. And ultimately, if you've got questions, you can always reach out to Texas Realtors legal hotline and ask some questions there. You can call TREC, you can call us. There's a lot of resources out there.
Anybody but me, right? No, I'm kidding. Yes, call. Listen, we're all available. I'm available. Shay's available. Michael, anybody that you need. But if it doesn't smell right, say something, right? If you see something, say something. Y'all know I repeat that on a daily basis. If you see something, say something. And don't go too long before you say something. Michael, your thoughts? Either Michael, I'll take either one. Doesn't matter.
I'll go after the other one. So.
Just the thing to add on there, one of the things that I find myself telling agents over and over and over again is if you're dealing with a lead source that wants to run an applicant's credit for the landlord, that's a huge red flag. Run away from that. If you're dealing with an applicant that wants to bring their own credit report, oh, I got this off Credit Karma and here you go. That's another huge red flag. I find myself educating agents all the time just how easy it is to get a PDF editor and just change the whole document around. So as agents, we should not be the ones involved in doing background checks. That's the landlord's function. You know, tell them how to do it, let them do it. But you know, when I find situations where agents are saying, well, you know, this tenant, you know, they wanted to provide their own credit reports. No, red flag. Let's talk about that. And so
That'll save the landlord all kinds of time and money. Listen, don't worry about running your own credit report. I got one right here. It's beautiful. Look at this
agents
thing.
are helpers, you know, they want to help, but there's some things where that gets them in trouble.
Absolutely. And again, just to kind of piggyback on that, and then also talk about some of the eXp policies for the eXp agents. That's who this is for. But at your brokerage, you should be looking at the same thing if you're not with us. But it is imperative that you are not doing these things and not being involved with running credit checks, running applications. I mean, your job is to list that property. Unless you're a property manager, unless your brokerage for whatever reason allows you to do property management under their brokerage. I mean, that's not something we do. But if you are involved in property management, that's a whole separate sort of thing. Your job, if you're the listing agent for that lease or for that rental property, is to find the tenant, to market the property, right? To help find that buyer, not to screen, not to evaluate, not to help them select. Because then a lot of times also you run into fair housing issues. That's where we see agents get jammed up with fair housing as well, is when they're trying to review these things with their client and then say, hey, we should pick these people because of that and the other. No, that's just stay out of the whole thing. Mary, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree completely. And, you know, you don't have to be a lawyer. I know there's a lot of lawyers here, but you don't have to be a lawyer to see these red flags, right? It's really a gut feeling. If you see something's off, then, you know, you need to inquire further. And just to go off what Michael just said, because it just made me smile, you know, the agents do want to help. I see that all the time. When something gets to my desk, it's usually bad, right? And I'm like, why did the agent do this? And they're just trying to help. But they just, you know, even though it's hard sometimes, you just need to stay in your lane, let the landlord take care of it. And to go off what Roy said earlier, you know, agents just have to keep in mind the third party referral source, you know, they're not being regulated and it's your license. So you just need to think before you accept leads, how are they vetted, and just to protect yourself and your license.
Absolutely. And, you know, again, I'm not enforcement. I'm not the real estate police, but I've got them here. So that's a great question. If you're hiring a third party entity to run your leads for you to do these things, are you still responsible as an agent? Are you still responsible for that?
I mean, you need to do your due diligence overall. I mean, a lot of times in these situations we've seen where they knew the red flags and they were complicit in it, and they may have even encouraged it because of one reason or another. So, I mean, they've run afoul of their fiduciary responsibilities and their, you know, duty of fair dealing to the other side of the transaction.
Absolutely.
As enforcement director, I mean, there's some help on the other side if that person is, represented, if they're trying to lease their property. We have seen situations where there are people who are trying to lease their own property on their own, and they got really got scammed. So in those situations, that's even worse in my perspective. And I think as a broker, if you see we see situations where there's multiple applicants of the same name. So there's brokers out there, they're not reviewing their sales agents' transactions, and then there's also just not overall clear policies and procedures set out at brokerages.
Right.
That's the foundation, and that's why I always recommend you review these policies and procedures frequently, and because the frauds pop up, and you may not have, things change and stuff, and it's just it's good business, obviously.
Absolutely.
Can I add something, guys?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I just kind of want to clarify that what enforcement has been seeing has been primarily on the applicant side of the transaction, right? Mm-hmm. It's not on the listing side. It's that the applicant's real estate agent is passing along falsified documents from the third-party referral source, right?
Yep.
When you're provided, and Tony, you said this, when when an applicant's agent is provided with a credit report, and I can't tell you, we cannot tell you, you can't use that, but I would really hope, and I think Michael, maybe Shay kind of echoed this, and I didn't have to, really, it's best practices to let the landlord or the listing agent run a credit report. And just be wary that if you're getting a credit report from a third-party source and you're not documenting, for example, that you can verify that it came from the applicant themselves, that could be a challenge with enforcement, right? And so if any of your agents want help in, how to, respond to a TREC complaint, what are the best practices? Well, if we go back to the listing of unimproved lots, it would be make sure you keep all your correspondence. And it's best yet if you have correspondence that reflects that you're truly trying to vet that the owner of the property is the owner of the property. When we move back to our current discussion point on leasing fraud, obtain document evidence. If you're going to pass along a credit report from an applicant, it sure is going to be a lot better if you can document that it came from the applicant themselves rather than a third-party referral source that is providing that, because what we're seeing is these third-party referral sources are the ones altering the documents in connection with their business model, which is getting people that have credit problems and maybe eviction problems magically approved for a lease.
Yeah.
Or maybe using someone that has good credit already.
Mm-hmm.
Using it multiple amounts of time, but the actual person that moves in there isn't the person on the lease or the application. So you could even run your own thing. So that's why we put in the article, like, some brokers have gone to the point like when we transfer the fee, the keys over to you, I want to see you face to face, or I want to ask for your ID or something like that. Obviously, like we talked about earlier, that could probably be, if you're really sophisticated enough. A lot of these things are really quick and dirty in certain circumstances, and not at the sophisticated level. But some of the instances we've seen for the other type of fraud, because there's not a whole lot of money. It's just a high volume type of fraud, and these people they're put into these houses, they know they're going to be out in a couple of months because they just won't be able to pay the rent and stuff. So.
Yeah, if you can get them addicted.
For illicit activities, we've seen it, for drugs and all kinds of things. So
yeah, no, I've certainly seen that. Also, it's a matter of having to try to evict that person, or make that person prove who they are. I mean, it's a nightmare. It is an absolute nightmare.
You're right.
So, and I think that those are valid points, and I think we talked about kind of this one lane, but I do like this Texas Realtors article here because it also digs into a few different types of the rental and like landlord fraud, right? So you have the synthetic identity fraud, where the applicant creates an entirely new fake identity from multiple stolen sources. We talked about that one a little bit. First person fraud, the person who applies for the lease uses his own identity, however, is not the actual person that moves in, right? We talked about that. We just got done. Also, a third party, the person who applies for the lease uses a stolen identity. So, we're touching all over these, right? And then identity manipulation, the applicant slightly changes some of the information, like a different birthday, and that kind of clouds the issue and then makes it very difficult to actually, pull the right social security number or change one number in their social. Now it doesn't generate the proper report, or says, that it's unknown and that kind of thing. And then they try to go, well, here's one that I generated, right? So a lot of these strategies can be used in conjunction to try to get over on a landlord, to try to get over on an unsuspecting agent that is not being scrupulous and meticulous, right? I know that TREC will smile when I say that. I thought I might get a smile when I say scrupulous.
There, Tony,
scrupulous and meticulous. See,
yes.
I learned. I've been doing this a little bit. Okay, so all that said, as well, and I think going back to one of Roy's points there, this is an income stream for folks, maybe not a ton. And this is another red flag when you have the landlord on the other side, right? Or conjunction of these two where it's listing fraud, but it's a listing lease fraud. What I've seen as well is, okay, send me over your $99 application fee and I'll hold the property for you. And they get there and the property's not even on the market or not for sale or doesn't even exist, right? There's just some ad that they created with AI, or they created some ad and put it on Facebook or Craigslist or whatever platform they're using. And they say, it's a great rent, beautiful home. It's only, $2,000 a month when it should be like $4,000 a month. Great. Awesome. Okay. If you want us to hold this for you, just send us $99 and we'll hold it for you till you get to the property but whatever. Right. So, but people are falling for it. People are going for it. So I think that another red flag is, to look and see, is this actually listed in the MLS? And if it's not, why not? And kind of stepping forward on that. So any parting closing thoughts? Well, I actually have one more question. What do some of the consequences look like for agents that are not being scrupulous and meticulous in their due diligence for their clients?
Well, I mean, it's always on a case by case basis.
Sure.
We had a case in the fall, and it ended up in revocation, and a significant. It was a high fine. It was in the 5 figures. So but this was an individual that repeatedly did the activity. I mean, it can run the gambit, but I mean, for me, this is, at least for the rental stuff, that's a serious, you can cause some significant financial, pain to the person that's leasing out that property. So if you're involved in this, innocently, and you report it or some of that, but if you're complicit in it, then you're looking for serious, punishment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that, to that end, we're just talking about, by the way, TREC, right? We're just talking about underneath the License Act. We're not talking about any other things that you might be opening yourself up to that, would kind of get Mary's juices pumping, right? And what you may be opening yourself up for, or opening up your brokerage for, which we also don't like to have you do. So, Mary, any parting thoughts?
No, but just to go off what you just touched on, not only are you going to put your license in jeopardy, but more likely than not, you're probably going to get sued, right? And if you have tenants in there that, you don't really know what they're about, we'll say, they could be doing significant property damage too. And who's the landlord or owner going to be looking towards to recoup those losses? They're going to be looking towards your brokerage and you. So just to go off what Michael said, there's a lot of consequences for engaging or failing to do your due diligence for these kind of tenants.
Yeah. And Mary, that is a really good point. I'll just add to that. In most of the cases that are complaints filed with TREC, there are significant damages associated with the fraud. In other words, the tenant moves in and not only do they not pay rent, but they destroy the property, right? And so that's absolutely, a concern on the civil side, because those numbers can run up substantially these days, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Shay promised to play the guitar on the way out. So thank you all so much for checking in, but he didn't get his guitar. So I guess he was just, I guess playing with our emotions. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Roy. Thank you, Michael. You've been incredible. Everyone else. Hey, listen, we've got your back. The whole point in this, and by the way, I'm not about to be brown nosing TREC, right? Because it's not about that. But what I will say, I talked to some of the other designated brokers. I talked to really all over the country. And I will say that our real estate commission is head and shoulders beyond what some of the other ones are. The other ones are this kind of Mount Olympus, sitting up there with a lightning bolt ready to strike agents down that screw up. And, I'm always, like, hey, that's not the way our commission is. Our commission is like, hey, we protect the public by educating agents. We protect the public by having a good relationship, right, with the agents and brokers, so that they are able to better protect and use their licenses not to take advantage either negligently or maliciously against the public. So thank you all so much for agreeing to pop on a call like this. I know there's no other state, no other regulatory body where this kind of thing is happening. So thank you all so much. Everyone else, have a wonderful, wonderful day. We'll see y'all next week.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Y'all have a good afternoon.
Bye-bye.